Oprah Winfrey once said, "The key to realizing a dream is to focus not on success, but significance. And then even the small steps and the little victories along your path will take on greater meaning." This is the Producer's Lounge Podcast, the best podcast online for tips and tricks on producing great film, television, and web content. Welcome back for Season 2, Episode 13, hosted and produced by GreaterAndGrander.com. On this week's episode, we're chatting with Paul Salamoff, who has produced everything from feature films to behind-the-scenes content, including his Saturn award-winning directorial debut, Encounter, starring Luke Hemsworth. In our sit-down in his office, we discuss turning defeats into victories and seeing Hollywood as a journey instead of a destination. As a side note, Paul has an amazing collection of sci-fi memorabilia, really impressive, including a life-size Dalek and the actual TARDIS prop control station from the film. You can check out our show page on GreaterAndGrander.com for this episode and see our photo gallery of Paul's office. Here now is my conversation with Paul Salamoff.
I started working in the industry like right away. It's funny, my daughter is just finishing up her first semester at USC like next week. I think it's the last day of classes. And she's going there for theater, but I was there for film, but I decided to stay out my first year, my first year out there, and I got a job working for Tony Gardner on he was just finishing up Darkman at the time. So then I worked on Addams Family, Mom and Dad Save the World, the Swamp Thing TV series.
So this is definitely like early 90s period.
Yeah. It was 90. It was that would have been 90. That would have been 90. Okay. So I got a job as a runner for Tony, and when I wasn't out getting supplies, I was working on the movies. And then he basically said, "Well, I'd love you to still continue to work here." So I basically talked to my parents. I was like, "Look, I can, this is back when USC was a little more, it was a little bit more reasonable. It was, I said, I can either spend $20,000 a year going to school or make $20,000 a year doing the thing that I've been wanting to do since I was 13 years old. Right. So I sort of just, they said, look, go back to school for another semester, see how it goes. And I sort of just jumped into it. I just sort of I went back to school for another semester, but I was already working on movies at the time, and I was finding that the stuff I was learning in class wasn't really jiving 100% with what I was working, in on jobs. And I just said, look, this is what I've come out here to do, right. So I sort of just jumped into it.
Well, it's
scale.
Interesting you mention that, because I went to USC probably 10, 12 years after you did.
Oh, yeah.
Found the exact same thing.
Yeah.
What they were teaching at film school was close, but not really 100%.
Yeah, especially the on-set stuff, the sort of the on-set experience and so forth, because I was already on set for movies at that point. But it was, look, I worked for 14 years straight as an effects artist, and I think on 50 films and 10 TV series and something 30 commercials. So,
oh my God.
Yeah. And it was I got into SAG as a puppeteer, and which I still get residuals. This is crazy. I still get residuals Batman and Robin. What are the ones I get? Batman and Robin, Scary Movie 2, Secondhand Lions, and one other movie I get. Me, Myself, and Irene. I think that's it all seemed to work out.
And then you said 14 years doing visual effects?
Yeah, doing makeup effects, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, it was a good... here's the thing. Always the funny thing about me is that, I grew up in Massachusetts, right? In one of the biggest sports communities in New England. And
Go Red Sox.
Yeah, I was not. The funny thing is, 3 of the Red Sox, my dad is a dentist, and 3 of the Red Sox were his patients. And we used to have 4th of July with them. Jim Rice came over to have 4th of July with because my neighbor knew a lot of them. I think that's how the connection got done there. But my brother, who's a year and a half older than me, he was an athlete. He was varsity, football player and stuff like that. And I was I could care less about sports. I was in the theater and stuff like that. And I knew pretty much early on, because when I was 13, I saw Tom Savini. My dad took me to a convention in Boston, and I saw Tom Savini. Do you know who he is? You know, he did like Dawn of the Dead, and he's a makeup effects guy. Okay. He did Dawn of the Dead. He did Creepshow and like Friday the 13th, and like he was sort of like the king of like gore back in the 80s, right. and then splatter and stuff like that. And yeah, he brought all these props from like Creepshow and Jason and stuff like that, and I was like, oh my God, this guy makes monsters for a living. It's like that's what I want to do. And it's like, thank God my parents didn't think I was completely mental, because I mean, we didn't know anybody in the film industry, except my dad. My dad had ironically gone to junior high with Peter Guber, which is kind of funny. Yeah, and I did get to talk to Peter Guber when I first came out to California, but who was I at the moment? At that time I was like nobody. Right. But other than that, I didn't know anybody in the film industry, and but they were very supportive. I think my dad realized me and my brother weren't going to become dentists. And the cool thing is a lot of the stuff they use in makeup effects is dental stuff. So like alginate, taking your teeth impressions. They use, dental acrylic and stuff like that, and also a lot of plaster and stuff like that. So my dad at least was able to teach me how to use all that stuff, and I just sort of, I worked in a movie theater, and I would make myself up like as Freddy Krueger when I think it was Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4 came out, and then I worked in a movie theater. A video store, and when From Beyond came out, I built the Resonator, and I built a Dr. Pretorius for that, and just when I think it was Friday the 13th Part 7 maybe, I made a bust of Jason for the video store and stuff like that. So, I got to do like. But
this is all still playing around in Boston.
This is all stuff playing around in Boston. But I started putting out like a portfolio and stuff like that. But but it was like the thing is, it's like I knew I had to come out to California. You know what I mean? Like I knew I needed to get out here, and I always say to people, I never really had a plan B. It was always just like work in the film industry or nothing. Yeah. And so I feel very lucky that I got into it, right away, which was really cool. And I think what it really is, and I always say this, is I feel like I've gotten more jobs in the industry based on who I am as a person and like my personality, as opposed to quote unquote like how talented I am. Because even when I was doing makeup effects, like at the time, I couldn't sculpt, paint, or draw to save my life. Working in this industry, makeup effects, which is very like it's almost all the crafts together. But there were things that I was good at. I was good at like doing foam construction, which is basically like taking a couch and turning it into a monster, and puppeteering. And I was good at hair work, and I was good at lab work, which was making molds and then. Because I'm such an organized person, they found out I had a really good aptitude for being on set. And because I took everything so seriously, I was very trustworthy. So they could send me to set and represent the company, and there was no concern that I was going to embarrass the shop or anything like that. And I sort of like moved my way up to the point where I was sort of running shops, and then my buddy Bill and I had our own effects shop, the misnamed shop, Infinite Effects, which we didn't even last a whole show. Whatever. You live and you learn. Yeah. You live and you learn. But and the thing is, I retired from makeup effects purposefully. Right. It was. I just found that there were other things I didn't expect to get into it so quickly. Right. So after working in a number of years, I was like, well, this is, I'm doing everything I wanted to do already. I've conquered so many like hills at this point. I wanted to see if there was other things that I could do. And I think that's a big mistake a lot of people make in this industry, is they pigeonhole themselves. And they think, I can only do one thing. If I'm this, I'm this. You know what I mean? Right. And I think the more you know and the more you diversify yourself, it just makes you better at everything. You know what I mean?
Do you really think that's something that individuals do, or it's more like the town and the industry? If you have credits as this, they'll only hire you as that.
Well, exactly. Well, that's the thing. It's like, so I tried to sort of beat them to the punch with that in regard. Even as a writer, I write in every genre. I'm known as a horror sci-fi guy, okay? But I've written a number of comedies. I've written a Western. I've written a couple of dramas. I've written a couple of action films. And, you know, and I write in every budget level too. I've got scripts that are in the $1 million to $5 million range, and then I've got stuff that's probably 80 million or more. But that's the thing. It's like, and it's funny because I've had a lot of, you know, I was at Paradigm for a while, then I was at APA, and then I was at William Morris Endeavor. Right. And you know, I don't want to say who, but I did have an agent that basically said they wouldn't go out with my comedies. And at the time, I was developing a comedy with Mosaic, which is one of the, you know, biggest comedy things, you know, and I was developing a comedy with them, and they go, well, we're going to confuse people because people know you as horror and sci-fi. And it's like, well, you know, do you know what I always say to people, which is funny, like, I was really happy when John Ridley won the Oscar for 12 Years a Slave. Now, do you know why?
I mean, it's funny you mentioned that. I've read his screenplays prior to him winning the Oscar, but please go on.
Okay, well, what other movies did he wrote Undercover Brother.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, all right, so John Ridley wins an Oscar for this really incredible drama, historical drama, yet he's the same guy who wrote, you know, Undercover Brother, an absurdist comedy. You know what I mean? Like action kind of comedy. It's like, how did that happen? Do you know what I mean? Well, because I think as writers, I don't call myself a writer. I call myself a storyteller. Right. And it's just if I'm interested in the characters and they're alive to me and the situation's alive to me, then I don't give a crap what genre it is. Right. And I actually bounce around. Like if I've written like a horror, I'll generally not follow it up with another horror. I'll like bounce around different genres.
Yeah, for no other reason, like a palate cleanser.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, it's always fun to sort of push myself and see what I'm capable of doing. And like I said, if I'm inspired by a story, I'm inspired by it. I mean, right now, I got hired to do a rewrite on it's a racial drama. Like it's about racism, and I don't want to go too far into it because it's early on in the thing, but it's I mean, this is like Oscar bait kind of screenplay. You know what I mean, for lack of a better word. You know, and it's like if you looked at my over, you know, of how many, you know, of my scripts, you'd be like, why would he even be interested in writing this? Because do you know why? Because it's based on a true story. It's absolutely fascinating, and I can really relate to these characters, you know, and relate to what they're going with. I think, do you know why? I think, you know, growing up, I mean, I can almost like look at it and say like, all right, well, I was teased and made fun of for being a sci-fi geek, you know, in an all sports town. Yeah. You know what I mean? So clearly that's not racism. Do you know what I mean? But it's the same, you know, we're talking about the same emotional palette here. You know what I mean? Of having been, you know, you know, like whatever, made fun of or lessened, belittled because of, you know, of something. You know what I mean? And for me, it was, you know, my love of geek stuff. You know what I mean? Which certainly at the time I grew up was not part of the, you know, culture. You know what I mean? We were way, way far away from any of the Marvel films coming out, the real Marvel films coming out. So there you go. Like, it's just as far as like being diverse in your, you know, in your journey, I guess. You know?
I'm curious what obstacles you faced, because you started out in makeup effects. You worked in makeup effects for 14 years, and then you transitioned into writing and producing. Like, in that journey, like, what were some of the big obstacles or some of the people who came up and said, no, we're not going to let you, and you had to prove them wrong?
That's great. I love that question. Okay, while I was doing makeup effects, in '93, I don't know, a certain movie came out that you might have heard of called Jurassic Park.
Okay,
right?
I've heard of
it. And I was working on Ultraman at the time, okay? And we were making, you know, big rubber monsters, right? I mean, kaiju, basically, right? As a group, I was working for this guy, Kevin Hutchison, and as a group, we all went and saw Jurassic Park. And of course, it was like, oh, we're fucked. You know what I mean? Like, we're fucked. Because they can now do, you know, they can now do this. I mean, still some of the greatest CGI effects is that movie. You know, the irony being that there was actually a renaissance in makeup effects after Jurassic Park came out, because they started making a lot of movies that couldn't be done all digitally. So there was still a very large physical effects component because the digital effects were so expensive and they were limited to a certain, point. So it wasn't until it was demystified, like as soon as people figured out how to do, that you could, it's sort of like this with makeup effects. As soon as people came in and go, okay, well, we need a fake head for this, and we know that costs this amount. When producers started talking like that, we knew we were screwed. You know what I mean? And CGI was magic for such a long time. But as soon as the producers understood how much it actually cost to do this stuff, that's when digital effects started to become, less mystified or whatever. So, anyways, when I saw, Jurassic Park, I really started realizing that. I got to start looking for other stuff. You know what I mean? It's sort of, the writing was on the wall, but it was sort of a combination of knowing that I wanted to do other stuff in the industry and finding other things I loved, and I loved to write, right? So I had, earlier I had sort of like, I had a Jerry Macaluso at Soda Effects. He and I wrote a couple of scripts together because he sort of taught me about like screenwriting. I'm a self-taught screenwriter. Though I did use Sid Field's book, The Screenplay, you know what I mean? Because it was very good for like really understanding structure, which I didn't understand at the time. So I wrote a couple of scripts with Jerry, and then I wrote a script by myself. And then what happened around the same time, Jurassic Park, I was working on Land of the Lost for Sid and Marty Krofft. And this is a relevant to your question, by the way. I promise you I'm not going off on tangents. It's actually relevant.
It would be weird if you just fuck Sid and Marty Krofft.
No. So I was a puppeteer on Land of the Lost, the TV series, okay? And we were working on the second season at the time, and I was always on set. I was always on set, and I had to read every script because I was one of the puppeteers. And I came up with an idea for an episode. And I went to the producers and I said, hey, I have an idea for an episode. Any chance you would, let me pitch it to you? And they liked me because, I'm a likable guy. And they're like, sure, of course you can. You know what I mean? And I know I was being humored. You know what I mean? I knew they were just being nice to me. But they said yes. You know what I mean? So now I understood how the scripts were written because I read every one of them. So instead of just coming up with a pitch, I actually wrote the entire screenplay or teleplay in the exact format they write theirs. And I came up with ideas for 9 other episodes. And actually, one of them actually tied it into the old series. Like they find Enoch. Like I wrote an episode, which is too bad we never got to that, where they find that cave and they find like all the old, stuff in it. But anyways, so I presented it to them in a very professional way, and they're like, wow. And they read my episode, and they loved it. And they gave it to ABC, and ABC approved it for the 3rd season.
Wow.
Yeah. And then they canceled the show. Mind you, right before Jurassic Park comes out. Right? So, but here was the thing, I was taken seriously as a writer. That's really what it meant to me. And I'm a big advocate of you turn defeats into victories. You know what I mean? You can't take this. One thing I've learned over the years, you can't take anything personally. If you have a thin skin, you're going to have a very, very very lonely and very frustrating career. Because this is now 33 years for me, right? And trust me, I've been kicked in the nuts enough time over the course of the years, decades to go like, all right, stop now. You know what I mean? I get it. You know what I mean? But I've always found a way. I'll give you an example. I was one of the writers brought on to develop the Expendables, the spin-off of the Expendables. And I didn't wind up getting the job. I went to the writers of Legally Blonde. But I had developed the story I developed with them was my own story. And I said, hey, look, can I, so when I found out I didn't get the job, which was crushing because I really, it was one of the best pitches I've ever given. I said, well, given this is my story, I go, if I removed all the Expendable stuff from it, can I just, turn it into my own thing? And they were like, sure, absolutely. You know what I mean? Like, which was really great. You know what I mean? Like that was because it was a really wonderful experience working. I worked like for 4 months, whatever, developing that. So I wound up, because I just developed it was like a 17-page treatment or whatever. I wound up writing the script in like a week and a half. And it was something like, and I wound up getting a lot of studio meetings because of it, because the script was really strong. But then I wound up ultimately setting it up as a graphic novel. And right before you came here, I'm literally finishing up the last final tweaks of the last couple of pages of the graphic novel. That will be, we've released them digitally, but this is chapter 4. I've got about probably a half an hour left of work on it, and then it gets done as a hardcover graphic novel as Hired Guns. It's called Hired Guns.
The publishing company?
No. It's with Marcosia out of the UK.
Got it.
But no, it's called Hired Guns. That's what it is. And it's sort of like the premise is like, what if somebody like a James Bond went rogue? Like, who would you send after him? That's like sort of like the premise idea. But it's something I'm really proud of. I'm really proud of the script, really proud of the graphic novel. And it's just like, it's something I wrote years ago, but I was able to repurpose it. That's the great thing about writing, is that, even with my movie Encounter, which, I came up with that idea like 17 years ago. It was just, I have a big book over there. It's my big book of ideas. It's like a 2-inch, book that just has like pages of ideas, stuff I haven't written. And every once in a while I'll go through it and I'm like, I should revisit this one or revisit this one. And Encounter came out of that, which is really good. But all right, getting back to your question though, about the challenges I faced making the transition. Yeah, it was a little challenging because here's the thing, but I made a decision that I wasn't gonna just write like, I'm gonna write a monster movie, because I felt like coming out of makeup effects, it would be such a cliche thing to do. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I got this great monster movie and blah, 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 blah. I just didn't want to be a cliche. You know what I mean? So I really, when I focused on writing, I did try to write very strong material that, was not purposefully horror, or if it was horror, it was very like, now they call it like sort of, what do they call it? Elevated horror. You know what I mean? Like, it's sort of, like the Hereditaries and like what A24 does. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, they call it sort of elevated horror,
I thought you said elevator, like.
Sorry, no, elevated, sorry, elevated horror. So I was writing stuff that was very character driven and was very, well thought out. You know what I mean? Like, because I didn't want to be a joke. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't want to be a joke. So, but the ironic thing is, because I was so organized and so good as a supervisor at the effects shops, people started asking me to produce stuff for them. Because they thought I would, be good at that. So I kind of produced some like short films, and I did stuff for myself, and people brought me on, and I wound up doing a feature. And then because of that, so I was still pursuing the writing career because I was having success as a writer, but I was really making my money as a producer. Because when I stopped doing effects, I stopped doing effects. That was it. I think Secondhand Lions, either Stuck on You or Secondhand Lions was my last movie as an effects artist.
I'm curious because I feel the timeline's always important when going over these stories. Yeah. When you say Secondhand Lions, around what year was this at this point?
That was 2000, what was 2001 was that?
Okay,
I'm trying to.
So 93, you get the script.
Yeah, well, I mean,
so
here, sorry, I should be a little bit better with my timeline here. Because I did also, so I guess I should mention these then. So my buddy Dave Parker, who's, written and directed, a couple of films, and I had met him at East Coast Orientation for USC. So we were friends at USC, and he started, working on his career as becoming a director, and he got the opportunity to direct a film for Full Moon, Full Moon Entertainment. They did like the Puppet Master movies and, all these, just sort of fun, crazy, low-budget horror movies. So he got the opportunity to do this movie, and he said he didn't think he was going to have time to write the screenplay. So he brought me on to develop the story with me, with the idea of me writing the screenplay, but he actually wound up having time. So I got a story credit on this, but it's called The Dead Hate the Living. That was like the first thing. This was my first official writer's credit, was story by credit on The Dead Hate the Living. But because of that, and I should, this would make it clear, because while we were finishing that up, the Blair Witch Project had come out. So when was that? That was 99, right?
Yes.
Okay, so the Blair Witch Project had come out, and Full Moon wanted to do a Blair Witch movie, clearly. Everybody wanted to do a Blair Witch movie, right? So they were looking for pitches, and because I was on Dead Hate the Living, because I'd gotten to know everybody, I asked if I could pitch something. So I came up with an idea that I went in and pitched it, and they basically said, look, I'm not really in love with your idea, but we like you, and we have an idea, and would you be interested in developing this instead? And of course, I was like, yes, of course. And it's like, well, shouldn't we tell you it first? You know, like, oh yeah, sorry, forgot about that. So they pitched me this idea, which ultimately became this movie, The St. Francisville Experiment, which you can see the poster behind you, which I believe is still on Amazon Prime right now. So they brought me in, and I get a producing credit on the movie, but I actually wrote the movie, because it was not supposed to be written by anybody. It was supposed to be like Blair Witch for real. Like we were putting people in a real haunted house and, you know, blah, 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 blah. Now, personally, the movie to me is not what it was supposed to be. And, you know, one of my first lessons about this, you know, how things happen in the industry, it's gone on to actually become a bit of a cult, you know, have a bit of a cult following, which is really interesting. So I've sort of like come to terms with it. It was a movie I didn't really talk about a lot. But what happened was after we made the movie, which I think was made for like $125,000, it was something really ridiculously cheap, or maybe $250,000. I don't remember what the budget was. But it wound up selling to Trimark for $3 million. Wow. Now, mind you, I didn't see a dime of that, but it was front page of the Hollywood Reporter. And I'm the writer on it, you know what I mean? So I used that opportunity. The movie was going to be coming out in like 6 months or something, right? And I knew the movie was crap, or at least I felt it was crap. And so I was like, I better, if I want to get a manager or an agent, I better like jump on this now before I, you know, before the movie actually comes out. You know what I mean? So I would send query letters to a bunch of managers. I decided to start with a manager, and of course, what I included with that was, you know, a new script I had just finished, and obviously a photocopy of the article, the front page article in the Hollywood Reporter. So clearly people got back to me. And you know, I met with, and then, you know, my manager, Scott Karp, you know, I met with him, we really hit it off, and he became my, you know, my first manager. And you know, that really gave me the sort of legitimacy. You know what I mean? So, and because of Scott's contacts, I was able to get, you know, meetings, you know, real studio meetings, and started to get my name around. And people started, you know, responding to my writing. You know what I mean? Like, and I had some pretty strong scripts at the time. I mean, look, I've written, I think, 35 screenplays at this point, all right? Feature screenplays. Okay? And, you know, obviously they're not all masterpieces, you know what I mean? Some of them are the redheaded stepchildren, you know what I mean? I love all of them, you know what I mean? I love all of them, but I know that some of them are a little touched in the head, you know what I mean? But there are other ones that are, you know, they're strong material. And I've actually gone back and read some of them, and I'm like, you know, this still works, you know what I mean? Like, of course my style has improved, and, you know, I'd go back and tweak some of these things, but some of them are still pretty solid. I know which ones of my scripts are decent, and I know which ones could probably use a little bit more work. You know what I mean? But it's all a process. I mean, that's a writer's right. You know, that's how you become a better writer, is just by doing it. You know, I mean, clearly, if I didn't, you know, if I wasn't getting any better at this point, you know, I should have given up long ago. You know what I mean? So, but anyways, so I was now really being taken seriously as a writer, but I wasn't making, I still need to pay the bills. So it was really the producer stuff that was paying those bills. And I fell into doing like video game marketing. And, first was DVD content. Like, so I was working on like the Buffy the Vampire Slayer season 4 and 5 DVDs. And I was doing stuff with Film Threat DVD, you know, Chris Gore's company. And then one of my buddies was a executive at a company for David Lancaster Productions, and he said, hey, we're looking for a new vice president of production. I think you'd be perfect for it. And I'm like, what? I'm like, I'm not an executive. I mean, like, are you joking? He goes, Paul, I really think you'd be great at this. Okay. And so I went in for an interview, and I really hit it off with David Lancaster, and he hired me. Okay. So I was like, now I was a executive. I was vice president of production for David Lancaster Productions, and we were doing a bunch of films like Wes Craven's The Breed, and what were some of the other ones? I'm trying to think of some of the other ones we were working on. Anyways, one of the other projects we were working on was Bobby. We were paired up with, we were co-producing that or whatever with Bold Films.
I assume you're not talking about Bobby, the Robert F. Kennedy.
I'm talking about Robert F. Kennedy. Yeah,
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was an exec on that. So.
I love that movie, by the way.
Oh, great! Oh, wonderful! Yeah, geez, 22 A-list actors in that film.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I had to go through every one of their contracts. So. While we were working, because they brought David in to sort of consult on it, but I guess the guy who owned Bold said, look, he wanted to, like, you know, restructure the company, and he brought David in as the new co-president with Gary Walters. But one of his caveats was that Garrick, you know, Dion and I would be brought in as, you know, executives.
Oh, wow.
So all of a sudden, I'm now vice president of production for Bold Films, and, you know, I was in charge of helping deliver films, and, you know, Garrick was in charge of development, but I was in charge of, you know, I would also do some development stuff, but it was more just making sure, like, contracts were done properly and everything was legal, you know, like, they were, like, missing some chain of titles. I mean, no, this is crazy that I'm actually talking about this in the sense that, you know, my big joke is I started my career making monsters, and now I was a monster, right? You know what I mean? But I was, like, the nicest executive. Like, sure, I was, like, you know, I don't take myself too seriously. I'm not run by my ego.
But also taking a step back, because I think it's important to kind of go over what a executive of production deals with, because there's an executive of production where you're in charge of the whole shebang, and then executive of physical production where you're really dealing with budgets and schedules and vendor relationships and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was more of a, it was sort of an offshoot of the development. I'm like, my first job, they had some movies that hadn't been delivered. Okay, there was some chain of title documents missing. It was for like, there was like 3 movies that Bold had that they hadn't delivered yet. And if you understand chain of title, I mean, like, or all these delivery documents, especially chain of title, you can't release the movie unless this stuff is buttoned up.
Right.
Because it leaves you completely exposed to being sued. Okay? And some of these films really hadn't gone as well as they should have, you know, because, yeah, I mean, look, every company, you know, starts off, you know what I mean, and people hadn't signed some of their documents. And it was my responsibility to literally go and find these people down and try to convince them to sign documents. Some of them weren't really thrilled about doing it because they weren't happy with the production. But, you know, they sick me on them, and I'm a nice guy, so I was just like trying to ration, you know, like, you know, so I did that for like 3 or 4 of their movies, and I got so good at delivery that when I left Bold Films, I got letters of recommendations from, it was like the Weinsteins, Roadside Attractions, and ArcLight Films all wrote me these really wonderful letters of recommendation because I had done such an amazing job. I was so organized when it came to doing delivery. I mean, it was just, I just, it's funny, I consider myself a creative, but I am really good at I love to organize things. Like, it's, I mean, you see my office here, it's not cluttered, you know what I mean?
Not at all.
It's like I'm just very an organized person, not anal retentive, just organized.
Right.
So that's what I was really good at as an executive. But the thing is like, I was like doing music rights, you know, helping with the music rights, especially with Bobby, and the contracts for Bobby, which was crazy, you know, and then they had me start doing foreign rights tracking, and it's like, it was cool because I was an executive, you know what I mean, but I didn't get in this industry to do this.
Right.
I wanted to be a writer. I mean, I wanted to do creative stuff, and this was getting so far away from the creative of what I wanted to do in this industry. So, you know, I made a decision, and at the time, I think I was rep by APA at that point, I think. And I had made so many great relationships with, executives at other production companies or studios and stuff like that, that I really just decided that I was just going to jump into it full bore. I had some scripts I was very proud of, and I think I was writing comic books at the time. I think I was started to write comic books at the time, and I was just having a lot of success, or at least perceived success in that realm. So I sort of just said, look, this is what I need to do. You know what I mean? Like, I need to make a decision now, or I'm probably going to be an executive for the rest of my life. Right. You know what I mean? So I sort of left doing that, and ironically got picked up by another production company, and I was their president of production for a while. But that was sort of an on-the-side thing, and they were going to do one of my movies. So it was sort of like, whatever, it worked itself out. But I sort of just dived back into it. And then I think I got involved with doing video game marketing shortly after that. So that, it's so funny. The great thing is I've enjoyed every aspect of it. Do you know what I mean? It seems so scattershot if you just look at it, but it isn't to me. It all makes sense to me. You know what I mean? It's all part of the same blanket of this is the entertainment industry. And if I can be creative doing this, like, it was fun doing video game marketing. Like, I wasn't even a big gamer at the time. And like, they would send us the games early, and we get to play them, and we would do like really fun stuff. I would get to work on trailers and dev diaries, and I got to interview Steven Spielberg for Tintin. I got to go to Amblin and interview him for 20 minutes. Wow. That was amazing. That was amazing. And he was so nice to me. And we geeked out about Doctor Who. And I had gone to USC with Oliver Robbins, who, the boy from Poltergeist. So, and that's one of, Spielberg's got his sort of like adoptive children. It's not adoptive, but you know what I mean? Like, he's got these, people he worked with that, he still considers like his kids, right? And Oliver's sort of one of them. So it was like sort of nice to be able to talk to him about that, and, talk to him about Doctor Who. I showed him my Dalek and stuff like that. And I mean, this is Steven Spielberg, and it was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. I mean, that's the thing I feel so lucky about is I've had so many really interesting things happen to me over the years. Like when I won the SATURN Award, one of the things I talked about was, because I was involved with the Sci-Fi Academy early on, like from USC. I was their youth president, and then I was their director of operations, and then I was their film moderator for years. And I even produced some of the SATURN Awards early on. And one of the SATURN Awards I went to, which was at Universal, I sat at one of the head tables with Joseph Stefano on my left, the creator of The Outer Limits and writer of Psycho, you know what I mean? And James Cameron on my right. And we just geeked out about The Outer Limits all night. I mean, incredible, right? Like, absolutely incredible. And I went to when William Friedkin, because William Friedkin was really good friends with Dr. Reed, who was the president of the Academy. And I got to go when William Friedkin got his star on the Walk of Fame. I was in the front of that with Sherry Lansing next to me on my right, and Francis Ford Coppola right to my left, behind me on my left.
Oh my God.
And it was crazy, I had just watched Patton the night before, which he wrote, you know what I mean? And it's like, I didn't expect him to be there. I mean, that was not I didn't know that he was coming to this. I'm I was literally so befuddled. I'm like, I watched Patton last night, because I love that movie. And it's crazy stuff like that, which has been so wonderful. And I always tell people, I now teach on the side at New York Film Academy. I teach screenwriting. Right. And one of the things I always talk to my students about is you gotta look at this like a long distance run. You can't look at it's a journey. It's a journey. Yeah. You're in the industry, and you have to learn how to enjoy the journey, and not base your worth or your whatever your success by others, because everybody has their own journey. Right. And I wrote this book called On the Set, which the 4th edition is now out, and it's got over 90 named people in it. I mean, people like James Gunn's in it, and Gail Ann Hurd, and Doug Jones, and Patrick DeTopla. I mean, lots of really cool people in it. But one of the things that's in it is like a lot of them talk about, you know, how they got into the industry and their sort of like journeys in the industry. And the one consistent thing about all of them is there's no consistency.
Huh.
It's everybody's got these different crazy stories.
That's so funny because, like, you know, you've been to Comic-Con a million times.
Okay.
I have to. Like, whenever you go to one of those panels, there's always like the top 5 questions they always ask, which is,
of course.
What is your creative process?
Yep.
How did you get an agent manager? All that stuff, and all of that is just trying to recreate like how did you succeed and how can I succeed?
Yes.
The truth is, it's entirely individual.
It is. It's entirely individual, but I think that's great. Do you know what I mean? Because, you know, if it was all nepotism, that would suck. Because, you know, if it was all like, there's no formula. Look, there's no formula for anything. I mean, like, you know, sometimes my students ask me, it's like, well, how do you write like the perfect script? Like, if I knew that, you know what I mean? It's like, everything is so personalized and subjective. And look, and I say this sort of with a bit of humor to it, but the one thing I have learned is that nobody really knows shit in this industry. You know, me included. You know, a lot of people are just making it up as they go along. I mean, look, there are people who are really good at what they're doing, you know, and have learned, you know what I mean, and really are professional, and so I'm not saying it's a blatant thing. But for the most part, I found is that most people are just concerned about losing their jobs. That's really what it's about. It's about, how do I survive in this industry, and you know, a lot of times when my students ask me, is like, well, like when you go into a pitch meeting, like, you know, how much do you prepare? And it's like, I don't ever prepare. I did it once and I fucked it up because, because you see these things where it's sort of like, you always have them in movies where they have like the writers come in and they're like, okay, we start on a black screen, you know, it fades in and rain comes down, and it's just completely, it's stupid and pathetic, right? I once tried to do a pitch like that and it was so bad. It was like, and I lost my, because the minute somebody asks you a question, you can easily lose your place. Yeah. Like, you shouldn't be pitching your ideas unless you know them. And if you wrote a script, I assume you know what the script's about, and you should be able to talk about it conversationally. I mean, I always tell my students that it's like, look, here's the thing. This is from my perspective, is that anytime I've been brought into meetings, and I've developed stuff with Warner Brothers, with Fox, with a lot of big production companies, and I always find that, you know, you're not coming in that room unless they're interested in you and you're interested in your material. Right. They've read something of yours that has said, all right, this guy's worth taking a meeting with. Right. So know that you're in there for a reason. They want to suss you out. You know what I mean? And for me, it feels like they're kind of looking at you, asking themselves 2 questions. And I know this is going to seem kind of farcical, but this is what it kind of feels like to me. That they're looking at you saying, all right, can I work with this idiot for the next, like, 3 months to a year? You know what I mean? And is this idiot going to get me fired? Right. That's what I kind of feel like. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. So when I go into pitch meetings, it's more about creating a baseline of a potential friendship with these executives. Mm-hmm. And a real friend. Like, I don't schmooze well. Okay, I'm not a schmoozer.
Me neither.
Yeah. I'm just who I am. Yeah. I mean, like, warts and all, I like to be goofy. I mean, like, I tell you, I've said this in texts, and I know people don't believe me, but I do this all the time. Okay? When I'm meeting with an executive for the first time, and we're going to meet somewhere, and I might not know what they look like or something like that, or they might not know what I look like, I always write this, no joke. Same thing all the time. All right, I'm going to wear that pretty red dress you bought me, and I put a little emoji of like the girl dancing in the red dress. Okay, okay. Now, most people would probably assume that is probably a stupid thing to write to somebody who would potentially hire you, but it's sort of my little barometer to see if this guy's a good, cool person. Right. If they laugh at it, that's, you know, I mean, it's supposed to be farcical and stupid. Like, I'm going to wear the pretty red dress you bought me. You know what I mean? It's like, because it's such an absurd thing to say that if they get a sense, if they have a sense of humor about it, it's like, good. This is somebody who I would probably enjoy working with. You know what I mean? Because I'm from Massachusetts. I'm sarcastic as fuck. You know what I mean? And I think you have to have a good sense of humor about everything. Mm-hmm. So if you're all bloody serious all the time, or you're dealing with people who are just really like oppressive and serious, I don't want to work with them anyways. Right. Clearly, I'm not going to turn down if they're going to have me write something. I'm not an idiot. But I want to sort of gauge I want to get to know these people as people. Right. Right. Do you know what I mean? And if I can bond with them on a personal level, I mean, it's not schmoozing. It's just like, you know, I always bring up Doctor Who because I'm a huge Doctor Who geek. You know what I mean? I have the TARDIS console. You know what I mean? It's like, so, and if I find out they're a Doctor Who fan, oh my God, we'll just talk about Doctor Who. You know what I mean? Like, I've had meetings where we've sort of not ever gotten to actually the work part of it. Do you know what I mean? We're just like, sort of just, you know, it's like, oh yeah, that's right, I'm supposed to be pitching. We're just shooting the shit.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's like, I actually have real relationships with executives who I consider my friends, who I have open door policies with, that I can, you know, I'm not bothering them if I want to say, hey, I got an idea, you know, here's a log line, let me know what you think. If you want, you can read the script, kind of thing. And I feel comfortable with that. And for me, for me, it's what works. Has it made me the most famous and richest person in the industry? No, it hasn't.
It's made you someone with a lot of Doctor Who memories.
Yeah, good, yeah. But I mean, but it's like, I've survived 33 years. 33 years, and I feel like I've barely scratched the surface. And most people, you look at, you know, my resume or look at, you know, whatever, my website, and they're like, holy shit, you've done enough for like 2 people. But to me, I haven't even scratched the surface of what I want to do in this industry. I still have so many, I have so many scripts I haven't even gone out with yet. And ideas that I haven't written yet, and things that I want to do, and, you know, and that's what's exciting. You know what I mean?
So what do you want to do in the industry that you haven't accomplished yet?
Well, the funny thing is, you know, I was never focused on being a director. Okay, I was always a writer first because I like storytelling. But my manager had encouraged me to do a short film early on. I did a parody of Unbreakable called Unbakeable, which is funny. If you know, I've never done a drug in my life. No joke. I've literally never done a drug. I've never even tried marijuana, and it's a drug. It's like a drug movie. It's like a parody, basically. Unbakeable, you know, the Bruce Willis character can't get stoned or drunk or anything like that. That's the whole, like, gist of it. So, you know, like the scene where, you know, in the scene in Unbreakable where he's lifting the weights and they keep on adding stuff. I mean, basically he's smoking a bong and they keep on adding more, you know, drugs to it and stuff like that. I mean, it's sort of like, but I did this thing on a very low budget, and it was just like sort of like this long trailer. It's like 10 minutes long. But I really, like, incredibly, like, remade, like, the images, you know, like, are almost, and it was funny because his name's the guy who produced Unbreakable. He actually saw it and he wrote me a really nice email that he was impressed with how well I was able to make it look like the other movie, you know, make it look like his movie. You know, I'd done that, and it played in festivals, and, you know, that is like, oh, wow, I really enjoyed this as a director. And then I wound up doing a short proof of concept for one of my scripts, which was actually one of the scripts that got me on the tracking board. I got on the tracking board, top 100 up-and-coming screenwriters a number of years ago, for a script I wrote called In a World and a script I wrote called Last Breath. I got on for 2 of them, which was crazy. You know what I mean? Like, that was crazy to me. But I was up to direct Last Breath, and it was all set to go, and then at the last minute they balked it using a first-time director, which to me is ludicrous, because I'll tell you something, there's like a list of, like, you look at some of these great movies done by first-time directors because they're the people who have something to prove.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what's so, it was so stupid. And I'm of the mindset, I've always been of the mindset where I'll decide what I'm capable of doing. So when people, like, tell you, well, you're not capable of doing this because you've never done it before, it's like, let me be the judge. You know what I mean? Like, let me prove to you. You got to at least give me the opportunity to prove to you that I can do this. I don't like people telling me what I'm capable of doing, because I know what I'm capable of doing. And it's not an ego. It's not even remotely an ego thing. It's you know, trust me, I love this. You know what I mean? Like, I'm obsessed with, you know, working in the film industry. So I wound up doing a short proof of concept for Last Breath. And that really did me well. And that gave me the confidence to say maybe I could do a feature. So doing Encounter, you know, came out of that.
Right.
And, you know, I guess the proof's in the pudding. You know, I wrote and directed the film. It came in under budget and on schedule. Played in a number of film festivals. I won a Best Director award, won an Audience Award. My actors won awards, and then I wound up winning the Film Threat Best Indie Sci-Fi award at their awards show, and then I just won a Saturn Award for Best Independent Film for it. So it's like, okay, well, maybe I have an aptitude for this, you know what I mean? So for me, it's sort of building on it, you know what I mean? So, Encounter was made for under $1 million. So now it's sort of like, all right, let's step up to the next level. I don't want to go into a $100 million movie. I want to do like a, $2 to $4 million movie or something like that to see, and so for me, it's really what I haven't done in this industry that I want to do. It's just continue to show people what I can do. You know what I mean? Like as a writer and as a director. Because I've never been, the influences on Encounter were people like David Cronenberg and Denis Villeneuve and Adam Egoyan. I don't know if you know who Adam Egoyan is. He did like The Sweet Hereafter. And he did, he's a Canadian filmmaker. He does these really interesting, character dramas. But I love him as a director. And Sweet Hereafter was a very emotional film. It's based off of a book. So I just what I want is just my voice. I feel like I know who I am as a writer and a filmmaker, and that's what I want. That's what I want to do. I want to either, as writing comic books, or writing screenplays, or directing movies. I just want to get some of the stuff that I'm most proud of out there.
So let me ask you. You've got 3 awards over there.
4.
4. Oh, excuse me. And they're a Saturn Award, and then what are the other 3?
So one of them's from the Miami Film Festival. One of them's from the Boston Sci Film Festival. That's the Best Director one. That beautiful. It's beautiful. It's like that big tower, the glass one. Yeah, and then the cup behind it. That's the glass cup. That's the Film Threat. Best sci-fi film. But I'll tell you, after winning, especially the Saturn Awards, holy crap! It's like. I already had great relationships with people who wanted to work with me, but now it's like really stepped up, really stepped up, and serious possibilities of directing and writing films right now, with decent budgets, with people I really like and respect. I even got a call today about directing a film, which was like, holy crap. I literally had to text my manager. I'm sorry to bother you on a Sunday, but we need to talk about this tomorrow. So, I'm actually getting a lot of rewrite jobs now, which is really exciting because I just love writing so much. So, I'm most happiest when I'm behind the keyboard writing because I don't ever get writer's block. I've literally never gotten writer's block. Never. Because I kind of know what I'm writing before I'm writing it anyways. Because I'm usually watching the movie in my head before I even sit down. But it's joy. It's one of the things I try to explain to my students. I'm like, please don't look at any assignment I give you as a homework assignment. It's you bringing your stories to life. You should be enjoying, you should enjoy these. You know what I mean? Because you're finally doing what you want to be doing for yourself. Because there's no reason why you can't take these scripts that you're working on and then sell them.
Right. So you made Encounter. What did you learn the most from making Encounter?
The good and the bad. I'm going to tell you both. Because I learned good things and I learned bad things, right? The good things I learned is that I have the ability to do this. Actually, one of the funny stories I always tell on set is one of my actors said to me there was 2 days left, or 3 days left of filming, and we were just sitting around enjoying each other's company and with my cast, and he said, hey, Paul, when are you going to have your big freak out? You haven't had your big freak out yet. In every movie I've been on, the director freaks out at some point. And I was like, oh, I don't think I'm going to have one. And I didn't. You know what I mean? Every day I came to set with a smile on my face, and it was a real love fest. And I'll tell you, I still have a text stream that is going on now 3 years. No joke. With my entire cast, Luke Hemsworth included, okay, that we celebrate each other, our birthdays, when great things happen. I think the last text was maybe 4 days ago. I mean, this is still going on. You know what I mean? Because it was such a wonderful experience for everybody and for the crew too. Because one of the things, having written that book on the set and really understanding, understanding what it's like to be in the trenches, before we started filming, I literally sat down with every member of my crew individually and got to know them. And basically told them, hey, this is what I'm kind of looking at. You're important. I can't make the movie without you. You know what I mean? And I want you to know that this is your movie too. You know what I mean? So everybody felt on my crew, that they were they weren't just a cog in the wheel. They were part of a machine that they were a necessary part of,
right.
So I learned that. I learned that I really do know how to treat people properly in stressful situations. Because look, directing a movie at a low budget is a stressful situation, but I enjoyed it. You know what I mean? I enjoyed it. I got to make the movie I wanted to make.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful thing. So, on the bad, I mean, not really on the bad, what I learned is that now I have a good baseline of this is how you do it to maybe spread my wings a little bit. But the one thing I did learn, and I learned this more from my editor, and I was very lucky. I had 2 editors on it. My second editor was Kevin Ross, who the editor on Stranger Things. He's an Emmy Award-winning editor on Stranger Things and X-Files and lots of great TV. One of the things I really learned from him is about quiet moments. And the thing is, I kind of, and it's surprising to me that I kind of forgot this a little bit, but you get so wrapped up with that when you're filming stuff that people got to be talking all the time. You know what I mean? And it's those quiet moments that really make movies.
Right.
And fortunately, we got in the habit of, because we were filming on Red Dragon, so it wasn't like we were going to run on a film. So we got in the habit of rolling, pre-rolling, and then letting the camera run even after I said cut. So you get those little magic moments where the actor's a little bit more unguarded.
Right.
And there was enough of those sort of quiet moments that we were able to make Encounter sing a little bit more. You know what I mean? Because the first cut of the movie was the movie, but there was kind of a little listlessness to it. There was something that just wasn't there. It was there, it was the movie, but it was a little bit of, it needed that pixie dust. And Kevin really brought that in, and a lot of it was those quiet moments. In what it does to the pacing and the overall emotional feel of the movie is magic. It really is. I mean, it really is true that movies are made 3 times, when you write it, when you shoot it, and then in the editing room. Right. And I have so much respect for what editors can bring and shape. You know what I mean? Because when I watched his cut of it, I was like, wow, I mean, I don't even know if I can quantify it. What he did, but he did something. And obviously he did something wonderful because, they won all those awards. You know what I mean? It's so I guess the bad of it, what I learned is keep that in mind. Keep that in mind when I make the next movie. Really concentrate on getting those quiet moments and really letting the film breathe. That it doesn't have to be wall to wall dialogue. Right. You know what I mean? Got it. So. And another thing I learned too is that I really am good with working with the actors because I don't do line readings, and I always said to him, I'm like, look, I know I wrote this script, but to me each scene is about intention. So these words on the page, obviously I wrote them for a reason, but if you as your character feels like you can get this across with either less dialogue or no dialogue, by all means do it. I always gave them the opportunity to do that because it wasn't the words that were precious, it was the intention that was precious. So as long as I felt we were getting that across, the dialogue wasn't so important if it was being expressed in another way. You know what I mean? Because I wouldn't really change. I mean, there's a couple of things I'm like, I wish I didn't do that, or maybe I should have understood this situation a little better. But you know what? That all, or a lot of the studios love to get free work out of you.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
But can I tell you something? there's a strategy to that. And I think this is really important, worth talking about. I really do. So if you don't mind, I'm going to talk about this. I think this is really important for people to understand. Right. Okay? Are you going to do free work in this industry? Probably. You know what I mean? I certainly have. I still have, almost to this day. You know, do people try to take advantage of you in that respect? Fucking absolutely. But that doesn't mean you can't be strategic about it. See, the best thing is, like, if I know I'm being quote unquote taken advantage of, well, then I have the upper hand, because I can say to myself, all right, you know you're being taken advantage of, but what can you do in this situation? You can either not do it, or you can say to yourself, all right, well, how can I use this to my benefit? Do you know what I mean? Like, how can I use this to my benefit? So a lot of times with the studios where they'll, like, unless you're some big A-list writer, they're not going to pay you to develop stuff. Right. Okay? It's just the way it is. Okay? I mean, let's be honest. That's the way it is. But, so let's say so-and-so over at so-and-so studios, I don't like the name, I don't want to embarrass anybody, you know what I mean? You know, a big studio, you know what I mean, is having you develop a project for them, okay? That if it does happen, well, that's going to be a lot of fucking money if it does. But the chances of it happening are usually slim to none. But I always make it clear to them, if you're not paying me, then I own it. Right. Okay? Then I own the screenplay, I own the work that I do. You know what I mean? And you know, and that's fair, because if they're not paying me for it, then, you know, that's the way it has to be. But what's more important to me is the fact that I might have meetings at other places about other jobs at other studios, other production companies, and I can say to them when they ask me, oh, what are you working on right now? Oh, well, I'm developing this project over at this big production company or this big studio. They don't know I'm not getting paid for it. Right. They don't know. And am I lying? No, it is 100% the truth. It's 100% the truth. And I've gotten more jobs because of that strategy than I ever did by getting those ever happening. You know what I mean? And I got a lot of script. I was going to write stuff anyways. You know, if you're going to write a script anyways, might as well write it for a big studio, because if they actually make it, you know what I mean? You're going to get fucking a lot of money. You know what I mean? But you can use that. You can use that to help get other jobs. Right. And it is the truth. You're not lying. I don't lie. You know what I mean? Like, I don't. It's not lying. Oh, yeah. You know what I mean? And the thing is I've got so many scripts that it was so funny. Actually, a couple of years ago, I decided to put a list of the scripts I had developed with studios and production companies together. And I was like, oh, Jesus. It was a lot more than I thought. But some of these are some of my favorite scripts. Some of them have come very close to getting done. Some of them are ones that are still in active play. You know what I mean? And, or I've repurposed them for other things. So, nothing was wasted. Nothing was wasted. And that's what you need to understand, is that a lot of people are so like, well, if I'm not getting paid, fuck them. You know what I mean? Well, that's good. You're going to have a very short career. Because unfortunately, this is like, you know, this is unfortunately the sad fact about this industry. You know what I mean? People are going to try to get work out of you all the time. It was just me trying to play three-dimensional chess my entire career. Do you know what I mean? Like, all right, well, I've got this over here, got this over here. How can I use this to my advantage to get this job over here? Right. And it's always seemed to work out. And, you know, like I said, I still have scripts that I have from these experiences that I absolutely love, that I own 100%. You know what I mean? So what did I lose out of that? Nothing. I actually got work somewhere else because of it, and I wrote scripts. I was going to write a spec script anyways. Right. So what's the harm? I'd rather do it with a studio than do it on my own, because if you're doing it on your own, you know, you got nothing with it. Yeah. You know what I mean? And to this day, I still have executives at these studios that really like me and are now really proud of me because I won the Saturn Awards, and they're like now like knocking down my manager's door. And I'm up to, you know, for so many, who knows if any of them are going to happen. But you know what? It's pretty fucking exciting to have people talk to you about directing movies with really decent budgets. I mean, it really does a lot for, you know, your, to keep you going. You know what I mean? Because it's those little victories. Will any of them happen? I don't know. We'll find out. You know what I mean? Even this weekend, I've got 2 different companies reading scripts of mine that could, Monday morning, I could find out I'm directing one and then writing a whole bunch of scripts for another company.
And you got a graphic novel on it.
Yeah, I've got a graphic novel that I'm so proud of. I mean, it's like, so, I mean, that's the thing. That's the thing about like going back and telling yourself whatever. It's just like, do what works for you.
And that is Season 2, Episode 13 of the Producer's Lounge podcast. Thank you to my guest, Paul Salamoff, for joining us. You can find out more about him by checking out the show notes and visiting our website, greaterandgrander.com. If you check out our show page on the website for the episode, you can see our photo gallery of Paul's office and the awesome den of geekdom that he's built up. Our intro and outro music today was Snowbound by Dennis Mitchelltree. Our episode still image is from the movie Encounter, starring Luke Hemsworth, cinematographer Denton Atkinson, and EPK producer Cody Taft. If you have any questions or suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know in the episode comments. You can stay up to date by following us on social media at the handle Greater Grander, all one word. Make sure to subscribe wherever fine podcasts are found, and also, if you like what we do, share this podcast with a friend who you think will enjoy it. Join us next week for more cocktails and questions, and until then, keep producing dreams.